Monetary policy decisions dominate this week's truncated work week in the Philippines as the Federal Reserve decides on interest rates on December 11 at 3 a.m. Philippine Standard Time. The Fed is widely expected to cut its key rate by 25 basis points on December 11 Thursday at 3 a.m. Philippine Standard Time. Hours later, our very own Bangko Sentral decides at 2:30 p.m. local time. The Monetary Board and the Federal Open Market Committee are each expected to trim interest rates by 25 basis points. Favorable inflation data from both the U.S. and the Philippines have cemented the likelihood of monetary policy easing from the U.S. to the Philippines. Ahead of these decisions, the peso hovers at its weakest in 2 weeks, while risk appetites have lifted local stocks to one-month highs and bond yields to 3-week lows. Risk appetites are holding up despite the continuing political noise and prospects of a slower-growing economy due to curtailed public infrastructure spending as anomalous flood control projects undergo scrutiny. The Philippine Institute for Development Studies says governance issues are likely to delay the Philippines' entry into the upper middle income club. In its recently released discussion paper, Restoring Confidence Amid Glocal Transitions, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies says restoring credibility, integrity, and trust in governance is no longer optional. It is the foundation of sustained growth. Well, with us now for more is John Paolo Rivera, the Senior Research Fellow of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS. Well, good having you back on, JP.
Hi, good morning, Kathy.
Welcome to the program. So let's first take into context that word glocal that you used, and the phrase you used, glocal transitions. I know we started the year pretty optimistic about the economy with Trump's tariffs being a key concern. But all that sort of slid into local governance issues towards the latter part of the year. So heading into 2026, what then is the bigger risk? Is it something overseas or is it something that we made up here in the Philippines?
Okay, for 2026, we see in our report that it will remain to be the combination of both global threats.
50-50?
50-50, global threats and our local governance issues here. For the global issues, we continue to be exposed to different issues, particularly in the behavior of the U.S. economy, the Federal Reserve's decisions on monetary policy, as well as the persistent geopolitical conflicts in the Middle East and in other areas in the globe. But then it will be complemented by our local issues here that we have most control of. We can control the effects of our local issues, particularly the governance, macroeconomic management, and that full control that we have here calls for good governance and our policymakers to be more prudent in creating policies, implementing them, and restoring confidence of the business sector, the foreign investors, so that money would continue to come into the country.
Well, how good is the government controlling, if you will, the narrative?
Well, the control of local issues would actually stem from the rate at which we're able to address the current issues we're facing right now, particularly the flood control issues. It has been, 5 months? The narrative has been running for 5 months already, and as of the moment, there's still no concrete direction on where the issues would go. And this one reduces the appetite of our local and foreign investors to put in their money because there is still no predictability, stability in terms of policy, which is the key ingredient for them to be more attracted to put their money in the Philippines. And we were saying that uncertainty, the antidote to uncertainty is credibility, that we have to beef up as of the moment entering into 2026.
So what's the ingredient there? What's lacking? How can we get out of this vicious cycle over the past 5 months? What should happen going into the new year?
Well, going into 2026, somebody has to be penalized for all the issues rather than just pronouncement that they're doing something. Somebody has to be penalized. Somebody has to take the brunt of the issue
just
because
one
the
person?
economy. I mean, persons. Because it's an entire system of corruption that has to be addressed. That's why in our report, we argued there that good governance is the ultimate direction towards addressing these issues. Somebody has to be penalized, and the Philippines must demonstrate that we are mature enough to know that there are certain elements in the economy, in the politics of the Philippines, that would feed into economic growth.
Well, one of the narratives that came through as we've been going through the 5 months of the governance issues is that we got $1 billion more of a reprieve from Trump's tariffs. In what way would that help? At least stem the slowing economy.
Well, on that note, I believe that the Philippines do have the funds. We are liquid enough. We have the money. The reprieve is very helpful because it allows us to buy more time. But the question here is, are we making use of that liquidity and that reprieve correctly? Or is it just going down to the drain that because we're too busy talking about the issues in the country?
You mean the $1 billion more of additional
Exactly.
zero tariffs,
Exactly.
which puts us also in comparison with the ASEAN. We used to be one of the fastest growing.
Yes.
I mean, where are we now, considering the state we're at and heading into the new year and also the end of the fourth quarter?
Well, relative to our ASEAN neighbors, particularly Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, they have been very intentional. They have been very deliberate into their economic policies, particularly Vietnam. They have invested so much in their tourism, in their transportation, and in the way they govern their funds and their politics. But here in our country, relatively speaking, we are still stuck into that rhetoric of politics, and then all the drama, all the stories that actually affects the economy. As what I have mentioned in our previous discussion, the economy cannot wait for the drama to stop. There has to be a hard stop to all this discussion so that the economy will start to recover. We are on the recovery path since the pandemic, but the trajectory has been disrupted by these new issues that have been revealed recently.
Which is why I think you could have probably had a lower growth forecast for the fourth quarter, but you've put in 5%. How did you keep that at 5%? I mean, the DepDev secretary said we could make the cut at 5, but given the kind of narratives you're now giving me, it seems that we might hit 4 for the fourth quarter.
Yeah, true. But then the optimistic economist in me still believes that the economy's sensitiveness to changes in macroeconomic fundamentals, especially now that we have entered the holiday season, I still optimistically believe that consumption could continue to drive the economy for the fourth quarter. And then the inflow of remittances, the BPO performance, even the continued recovery of tourism would actually augment that. However, it is conditional on how fast government will react, how fast government will be able to resume government spending, for the remaining weeks of 2025.
Well, when you go to the malls, you see a lot of footfalls, but I really look at the shopping bags. Not many still. I mean, are they really buying? Well, what are you seeing so far? Your channel checks, wet markets, malls, and groceries.
Well, so far, the Filipino people have been very traditional in terms of the holiday season, and they would find ways to be able to finance holiday spending due to prioritization. However, the constraint would continue to lie on the lack of purchasing power, even if inflation has actually been lower.
So why is that? I mean, it's 1.5%. Nobody got it right this time. We were all a little bit higher, but people feel that 500 is not a lot of money to get what they need to fill that Noche Buena basket.
Well, this is actually driven by the fact that income is not actually rising as fast as it should be, given the changes in inflation, given what's happening in the economy. But then the Filipino people remain to be very consumerist. And I'm expecting that by this fourth quarter of 2025, there is some boost coming from holiday consumption from both households, private firms, and hopefully government.
What's going to happen then for 2026 without the holiday spending boost, if that's going to be the key driver for the fourth quarter?
Well, for 2026 in the first quarter, historically speaking, we always see a slowdown in economic activities by January because of everything that has happened in December. That's why we're encouraging the government and other forms, other economic sectors to contribute to this first quarter 2026 growth through additional spending and even the attraction of foreign investments and local investments to the scene by first quarter.
Well, let me pick up on infra spending because we're under a state of calamity as it is since November 7th. That goes on for a year. So presumably the money needed for rebuild is going to be there and a lot more quickly. I mean, how is that going to show up in the numbers?
Well, in terms of the numbers, this is where the report comes in that we wrote that we need to pay attention to the leakages. Because these leakages are actually foregone infrastructure, foregone benefits to farmers, foregone technology to boost our agricultural production. And not managing all these leakages as early as 2025 would spill over to some deficits in 2026.
With or without corruption, those leakages exist. Is that
They
what you're
do.
saying?
They do.
Or the leakages already are part of the corruption governance issues?
Well,
that
the
still
leakages has
exist?
just become very apparent now, given what's going on. But the point here is that there is really a need for good governance, for reduced corruption, so that we mitigate the leakages, so that the opportunity cost of the leakages can be transformed into real economic benefits.
Yeah, but the optimistic economist in you says it's 5.3% for 2026, still 5%. So where is that bump up going to come from then?
Well, the bump up would come from, number one, would be the return of foreign investments to 2026, particularly because of the strong macroeconomic fundamentals. But that's why I keep on emphasizing that good governance has to begin in 2025 so that boost can materialize. Because as of the moment, good governance is really the key. Credibility is really the key, which will allow us to catch up with the growth rate of other countries, particularly in ASEAN.
But how do they see beyond the smoke? Because right now, they've held back. Perspective or current, really, when you look at CapEx, what is it going to take for investors, foreign or local, to invest back again in a big way for 2026?
Well, for 2026, investors do have a major requirement, and that is policy stability, policy credibility, and that those whom we expect to implement the policies would actually be prudent enough to transform the policies into real economic benefits. So it's really credibility.
Which takes us back to public confidence and public discourse, because we've seen at least two protest rallies, September 21st and November 30th, and presumably another one coming up on February 25th. I mean, if that keeps on going, what can turn the tide? If things go as they are, what are they really looking for in the end to mitigate and also to restore the lost confidence?
Well, going into that narrative, I just wanted to cite a report by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Business Expectation Survey, wherein confidence drops when the headlines are flooded with governance issues. And knowing that, there has to be some form of real effects, wherein, yes, the rallies will be there, the protests would be there, but then it has to transform into a benefit wherein there are certain personalities that would be penalized. The justice system is rolling according to its right course, timely course, and that would actually offset these governance issues plaguing the headline. Because, hey, even if there's protest, real effects are actually manifesting.
And in the meantime, as that has yet to manifest, the Bangko Sentral seems to be hard carrying. How much of a rate cut will it need to do before the end of this year and next to keep the economy at least 5% growth?
Well, again, optimistically speaking, while we do want a 50 basis points cut in the rate, that might be too much given the sensitivities of the economy. So I would just expect a 25 basis points cut. I mean, traditionally, the BSP has been very calibrated in its rate cuts, observing not only what the federal bank is doing, but also observing the interest rate differential, because it does affect the attractiveness of the Philippines in terms of the cost of borrowing, the rates of return. So other than the behavior of the Fed, those differentials would also have to be monitored.
That's true. We'll get some answers in about 48 hours from the Fed and the Bangko Sentral.
Looking forward to the strategy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the analysis.
Thank you so
there.
much.
JP Rivera of PIDS.